There is a dark side to rural hospitality. Sometimes, when a remote village welcomes strangers with open arms, it isn't because they're being kind. It's because they need someone else to stand outside when night falls. Tonight, I will tell you about Kanchamati, the night of raw earth, a festival held once every 10 years, where clay remembers the shape of every person it has ever consumed. My name is Ayan. In the winter of 1997, I traveled across rural Bengal, documenting forgotten traditions for my travel channel. One evening, I reached an isolated village hidden beyond the forest. Online forums called it the Festival of the Clay Hosts. Nobody explained what that meant, only that outsiders were welcome. There were 8 of us. The villagers greeted us warmly. Children laughed, women cooked enormous feasts. Old craftsmen sculpted life-sized human statues from straw and grey river clay. Every house had one. Each statue looked uncomfortably real. Their painted eyes seemed almost wet. As sunset approached, I wandered toward an elderly potter, shaping another figure beside the river. Without looking at me, he quietly said, after the 3rd drumbeat, his fingers never stopped working. Don't count the statues. I laughed. What happens if I do? He finally looked up. His face had absolutely no humor. Because after midnight, they began counting us. The 3rd drumbeat echoed, casting a sudden chill over the village. Then everything changed. The villagers stopped smiling. Without explanation, they hurried indoors. Heavy wooden doors slammed shut. Iron bolts locked. Windows covered. Every lamp went dark. The 8 tourists were left standing alone beneath the moon. Rohit pounded on a door. Hey, what's going on? No answer. Only silence. Then, midnight arrived. One statue slowly turned its head. Another stood, then another. Across the entire village, dozens of clay figures rose from the porches. Their movements were impossibly stiff. Every step sounded like dried earth breaking. Nobody moved. Then, every single clay host slowly raised one arm and pointed at Rohit. Not one, all of them. At exactly the same time, Rohit screamed. Then everyone ran. The clay hosts didn't sprint. They walked. Slowly, patiently, but somehow, they were always closer than they should have been. Every time I looked behind me, another one had appeared ahead. The village itself seemed to shift around them. I heard screams echo through the darkness. One by one, they stopped. Not because people escaped, because there was no one left screaming. I ran blindly into the forest. A root caught my foot. I tumbled down an embankment and crashed into something cold. It wasn't water. It was a deep pit of raw river clay, grey, cold, heavy. Within seconds, my body was completely covered. The smell of wet earth filled my lungs. Then, a shadow stood over me. One clay host. It leaned down. Its unfinished clay face hovered inches away. It inhaled slowly. Searching, my heartbeat felt loud enough to betray me. The clay covering my skin began drying in the cold night air. The creature tilted its head. Confused, its fingers brushed my shoulder. Then, It simply turned away. To it. I was no longer alive. I had become part of the earth. I remained frozen for what felt like hours, watching, listening. The clay hosts ignored me completely. One by one, they disappeared into the darkness, following distant screams. Just before dawn, someone whispered, "Don't move." It was the old potter. He was hiding nearby beneath a layer of clay himself. Only his eyes remained uncovered. Without looking at me, he quietly said, "The clay hides your breath. It hides your warmth. It makes them believe you've already been claimed." I whispered, "Why didn't anyone warn us?" For a long time, he said nothing. Finally, his voice broke. "We warned the first outsiders 50 years ago." They laughed. The clay hosts couldn't find them. He closed his eyes. So they took our children instead. Since then, someone must always remain outside. The first ray of sunlight crossed the village. Immediately, every clay host stopped moving. One after another, they collapsed into lifeless piles of cracked clay and straw. The villagers slowly emerged. Nobody celebrated. Nobody cried. They simply began collecting broken pieces of clay into wooden baskets. I stood frozen, watching in silence. Then something caught my eye. Mixed within the grey clay, tiny white fragments. I knelt down and picked one up. It wasn't a pebble. It wasn't a shell. It was a human tooth. My pulse quickened. A few steps away lay a broken fingernail. Beyond it, tiny splinters of bone buried in the clay. My stomach turned. Slowly, I looked toward the old potter. He met my eyes without surprise. He simply nodded. Then in a quiet, almost weary voice, he whispered, "We don't build the hosts." He paused. "We grow them." I never returned to that village. I deleted every frame I had recorded. No video, no photographs, nothing. Some places aren't meant to be documented, only survived. People still ask me why I stopped traveling. I always smile and tell them I simply lost interest. The truth is that every winter, when the air grows cold and the river begins to recede, I wake to find a thin layer of grey clay outside my front door. Never enough to leave footprints, just enough to remind me that the earth remembers. And sometimes, when the night is perfectly still, I hear the slow, deliberate crack of drying clay, as if something is standing just beyond the darkness, waiting for the next festival of the clay hosts. So if you ever find yourself in a village where every porch holds a lifelike clay statue, and every family locks their doors before midnight, don't waste time asking questions. Leave before the third drumbeat, because once those doors close, the village has already chosen who will remain outside.